Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to take a couple minutes to let everybody come on before we start. I see Jason, Toner, and Gordon. Welcome. If you have any questions for today for Mayor Drew Dilkens, please put them into the chat. We'll monitor those and we will address them in the Q&A portion of today's webinar. We're almost there. And if you have any questions specifically for the chamber, or if you have any feedback for us or our staff, please leave them at our info at. I've posted it to the chat there, so info@windsor-essex-chamber.org, and we will make sure that it gets into the right staff's hands. Hi, Frank. Tony. Also, in regards to our webinars, we are updating daily on our website and all of our social media channels. So follow us on those to see what we have coming up. We have one tomorrow at 2:30 with Warden Gary McNamara. Registration is open for that one currently. I think we're almost there. We'll give it another minute to have everybody settle in. Okay, I think at this time, I will pass it on now to our President and CEO, Rakesh Naidu, and we will get started.
Thanks, Marina, and good afternoon and welcome to everyone. Rakesh Naidu, President and CEO of the Windsor-Essex Regional Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining us on Thursday afternoon for this webinar series. As you know, the Chamber has been offering this webinar series. Today's the third day. Yesterday we had our MD, Eric Kuchmaricek, in here. And today we have His Worship, Mayor Drew Dilkens, with us. The intention of these webinars is to bring you the latest and the greatest information, to get you to connect directly with elected officials, people on the front line, experts, so that you have the opportunity to hear from them, find out what's happening locally, provincially, federally, have also the opportunity to ask questions, to provide inputs, to provide suggestions. So this is our way to connect you to the people that are doing a significant amount of work, working collaboratively, and not just regionally, but also with officials in the province and with the federal counterparts. So, you must be up to date in terms of what's happening, but just to give you a very, very high level update, we've had the 5th case identified today in a region. And, in Canada, the number keeps going up, and so in US. Having said that, there is a lot of good work that's happening. A lot of organizations are coming together to address this, whether it's the healthcare workers, or whether it is the government officials, or whether it's the business community. Even here locally, there are so many companies that are working together to find solutions to come up with products that can be used at this time. So many companies have diversified from the core manufacturing or the core product into making parts for ventilators, for there are companies that are making hand sanitizers, and they've never made this before. the companies that were into tooling and mold making that are now making molds for masks and so on. So there's great examples of what's happening locally. And we're very proud of the Windsor-Essex region for coming together. There's also several organizations that are together collaborating and working to find solutions for the business community and for also the community at large. The federal government, as you know, has announced several measures. The Canada Emergency Response Benefit Program was announced, which gives those that are not employed about $2,000 per month for the next 4 months. Information on that is on canada.ca website. A total of about $107 billion being spent by the federal government. The application portal for you to access that program, the CERB, will be available soon. The Chamber of Commerce will also have it on its website, so stay tuned for more information on that. There's also child benefit that is being increased. GST credit is being supplemented as well. So there's quite a few things happening federally, provincially, as you know, that yesterday the Ontario government released its fiscal update, and it has announced a $17 billion package to help people during this time. And there are several measures that are being taken. I'll quickly run through them. There is the provincially administered taxes are being deferred, with a total value of about $66 billion. They're also differing workplace WSIB premiums. There is about $1.8 billion that's been set aside for property tax deferral, and the mayor will ask him about the local portion of that as well. They're also reducing the DHT, which is the employer health tax, and increasing the exemption from $490,000 to $1 million. And also there is a program for communities where the employment has been hit and the growth has slowed down. So we'll talk a bit about that with the mayor as well. And then of course, the reduction in the electricity cost to off-peak rates, which is something which the mayor has been advocating for quite some time. So we're happy that the provincial government has decided to work with us and has agreed to bring the rates to off-peak pricing. So a lot of things that are happening provincially and federally, but also regionally, locally. As you know, there's a lot of things that is happening. Mayor Drew Dilkens has been a champion for the region. He's worked tirelessly, not just now, but even when he was away with his family, he was round the clock in touch with people here in Windsor, even though he was out of the country. And after he came back, he's been in self-isolation, but he has been working round the clock again, working with the city staff, with emergency support workers, emergency services providers, business community at large. And there's been a lot of good information that he's been releasing through his, his video posts, to his Twitter handle. And I'm sure most of you have paid attention to all the good information that he's providing us. So Mayor Drew Dilkens, I know that your time is very precious. Appreciate you taking the time to come and update us in terms of what's happening. And also thank you for doing everything that you're doing. I know you've not had any rest in the last few weeks. And I really appreciate you making the time for this and doing everything you're doing for the community. So with that, Mayor, I have a few questions that we have received from our business community. I'll post them to you. But let me begin by asking, how are you doing? You were away from the country, you had a hectic travel back, and since then it's been one thing after the other. How are you doing personally? How's your family doing? And how's everyone at home?
Well, thank you, Rakesh. Thanks for having me today. Everyone's fine here. We're 100% fine. We're just undertaking the 14-day self-isolation period. We actually left from Detroit on March the 5th on a pre-scheduled vacation with my wife and my son and my mother-in-law and mother. And it wasn't until about halfway through that all of a sudden the World Health Organization made the declaration that COVID-19 was in fact a global pandemic. And from that day forward, things have certainly changed dramatically. Not just in our community, but in our province, our country, our continent, and frankly, around the world. So thank you for asking. All of us are fine here. We're looking forward to Monday when we can open the door and leave the property once and for all. But it's an important thing, I think, for folks to do, to self-isolate. It's the best advice from the medical officer of health, whether locally, provincially, nationally, and frankly, best global advice as well from the World Health Organization.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, we're aware that you've had several meetings with not only officials here in the city and the other essential service providers, but also you are in touch with the other mayors, as I understand. You're also in touch with provincial ministers, with the premier, with ministers in the federal government. Tell us, what are you hearing from different ministries, your counterparts? This group of mayors that I understand is in constant touch with each other to really come up with strategies and best practices that at this time we can leverage, so that we in this region can come up with solutions that are local, but at the same time we can also share what is being done elsewhere in the country and the province. So tell us, what is it that you're hearing, and what is it that you and the others in the city are doing to address the situation?
It's a good question, and the really interesting part of this, Rakesh, is that with the current setup that we have, both federally with Justin Trudeau's government and then provincially with Doug Ford's government, there is really good communication. As mayor, if I reach out, almost always get a response, and a fairly timely response. But this issue has particularly, torn down any walls or any delay in response. Everyone is working very well together at all levels of government. You see that happening. I hope the public sees that happening. Even regionally, I was on the phone today with 4 mayors from our region talking about issues that we can get into later on in the conversation. But there is great communication, great cooperation. I think everyone has set aside politics and is just saying, how do we help? How do we move through the next 3 weeks or 3 months, whatever it's going to take to get to the other side? People are just saying, what's it going to take to make sure that residents, that businesses, that industry can survive, have the tools that they need to just to get through. And then once that, say, 90-day period is up, the focus will then be, how do we deal with what we had to do during that intermittent time and move forward? And there was no doubt, all 3 levels of government, all business, all residents, I don't think there will be anyone or any business or any organization that is left somewhat financially not scarred by this. This is going to have an impact across the entire economy. The question is, how deep will the scar be? How big will it be? And how fast can we start the healing?
You're right, Mayor, and that's key. How do we really minimize the impact? So tell us, what is the city of Windsor been doing? What are some of the steps you've taken to not just address, the business issues and the business concerns, but overall, what is being done in the city of Windsor to address this situation? To make sure that the city is offering its services to the extent possible to its community, and what are some of those services that you're continuing to offer?
Well, I think all efforts by most mayors today are really about what everyone's talking about, flattening the curve and taking all the steps necessary to try and reduce the spread or the transmission rate of COVID-19. So from a City of Windsor perspective, certainly I declared a state of emergency prior to everyone coming back from March break. We closed all arenas, libraries, pools. Those things are closed. We're moving forward. Actually, as we speak, the press release is probably going out with respect to closure of playground equipment in the City of Windsor. And we're actually going to take a pause for 2 weeks on Transit Windsor and close down that entire system for a period of 2 weeks. And so some of these steps individually, you may have seen strikes or intermittent gaps in the past, but when you put them all together, it's really unprecedented, the response from the City of Windsor perspective and what you're seeing happening in communities across the country and frankly across the continent, around the world. The response is unbelievable. And so what we're trying to do is deal with the immediate threat, which is the spread or the transmission of the virus, trying to minimize the touch points and really encourage people to stay home. Obviously, you need to get groceries and deal with certain issues in your life, but most non-essential businesses have now been closed in the province of Ontario. And so there isn't a lot left to do. Folks are just best advised to stay home for 2 weeks, and we're trying to do whatever we can do to encourage that. From a city perspective, what this means is, like for instance, we've been operating Transit Windsor buses. recognizing that it's an important service for many. But we've stopped access from the front doors. We only open the rear doors to stop transmission or any contact with the driver, or to minimize transmission and contact with the driver. But what that means is we collect no revenue. So it's all expense to deliver that service, and the volume has dropped by more than 50%. And we see that basically happening citywide. We've put our staff, the ones who can work from home, basically everyone's working from home if they can. There's some core folks working inside City Hall to make sure that we can continue to move things forward for the folks who are working at home. But certainly the public has no access to the 350 City Hall building. And then you look at probably the biggest step that council can take, because as a municipality, of all the taxes that are collected, of every dollar of tax collected, the municipality ends up with about 7 cents. So we're the municipality, or the level of government, that has the least amount of financial fiscal capacity to deal with the types of things you see the federal government or the provincial government do. And we don't have those tools in our toolbox, so we rely on them heavily. But to the extent that we can control our tax, which is property tax, we have done that by deferring payment for 90 days, trying to kick the can down the road and allow folks who are struggling and business who are struggling. And by the way, this deferral is for every class of property tax owner. It's not just for homeowners. Whether you own a business, an industrial, Chrysler could ask for a 90-day deferral on paying their property tax. So nothing would be due until June the 30th, and there would be no penalties and no interest associated with that deferral. And, you know, it may seem like from those on the outside looking in, it may seem like a rather benign, thing given out, a benign effort. But in fact, we cannot find any instance where this has been done or even considered, unless you go back to the days when David Kroll was mayor, back in the 30s, Great Depression era, and sort of war era type things. And so it's a big move for the city. We probably have some capacity to do a couple more months, depending on what happens with the situation. But we wanted to monitor that to see where we are first before we offer it all up. But we know there's going to be some pain here. We know, the deferral does not eliminate the requirement to pay taxes. It certainly just defers it for 90 days, but it allows people to conserve their cash, deal with the necessities of life. And I think from our perspective, that effort, combined with what's happening at the provincial level and the federal level, leads to a material assistance to residents in the community.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. I think that at this time, this will be very useful for businesses and then for individuals who can defer the property tax. So I believe there is an email that you tweeted out. It's, I think, propertytax@citywindsor.ca.
Yeah, so thank you. So everything will continue as normal. So if for instance, many of us will still continue to pay property taxes for the next few months. If you have the ability to do that, that will happen. If you want an exemption, if you want the deferral to happen, you have to take positive action by emailing propertytax@citywindsor.ca. And when you do that, then the folks on the other end will get the email and they will do what they need to do in order to set things up in the system to have the deferral happen. So really what needs to happen, if you just get regular bills from the city and you go to the bank or you pay them online, you just don't have to pay until June 30th. There'll be no penalty, no interest. It's really those who've given us post-dated checks or have set up pre-authorized payments directly with the city. Those folks, if they want a deferral, have to take a positive step to effect the deferral. And again, it's propertytax@citywindsor.ca.
Thank you, Mayor. And so if I understand this right, this is the full property tax that people are able to defer, the provincial portion and also the municipal portion, correct?
Yeah, so it is the municipal portion of the property tax. So the other component is the school board component that folks pay. We can't deal with the school board component, but we're circling back now because just yesterday, the province of Ontario provided some relief, and I'm just reading from their press release. This thing changes so fast, and there are so many moving parts evolving so quickly that it's sometimes hard to keep up. When you put one press release out, it can be stale dated within the course of 2 or 3 hours, depending what's happened. But the province has, the government's decision was to allow for a 90-day deferral of the June 30th quarterly remittance of education property tax to school boards. So we would also include the school component of that in our deferral because we're not required to submit that either.
Okay, so that's good to hear. So for those that are interested in applying for deferral, it's the full property tax deferral that includes the municipal portion and the school board portion.
Correct.
And again, the information Marina just has put it on the chat. If you're interested, you can access that email. Mayor, also because of how strongly we're integrated with Detroit, and of course there's still people from the Windsor-Essex region traveling to Detroit, and there are healthcare workers from Windsor-Essex that are employed in hospitals over there. There's also still trade that is happening between the border, and I'm sure you must have reached out to your counterpart in Detroit, or some of your officials must be in touch with them. What is your interaction with them? What is happening, and what kind of coordination is there between Windsor and Detroit?
Yeah, so there is a good cooperation between Windsor and Detroit. I haven't been able to connect with the mayor. His father died, so he's been dealing with family issues, but certainly we're in contact with the office. He's getting the messages. And what we're really both focused on is making sure that from a healthcare perspective, that hospitals can continue to function over in the greater Detroit area, but also that we can continue to function here as well. And as you mentioned, Rakesh, there is great integration between the healthcare systems, although it may not appear that way. It may seem like a drain from here over to Michigan. If the border somehow closed tomorrow and no one was allowed to cross it except grocers or people delivering things to Walmart or Costco, it would probably close down Windsor Regional Hospital, or it would have a dramatic impact because there are a number of employees, believe it or not, who live in Michigan and cross the border to work at Windsor Regional Hospital, including at least 5 physicians. And so there are serious considerations that we have to work through here, and the conversation that we're having with the Deputy Prime Minister and others is to make sure that they're aware of what it's like, what the boots on the ground are dealing with down in this area. Now, saying what you said, there are efforts on both sides of the border to look at hotel accommodations. We recognize that folks are traveling back and forth, healthcare workers are traveling back and forth, and we certainly want to slow the spread. If someone's picking up something working at a hospital in Michigan, we don't want them to bring it back here, of course, or vice versa. And so there is an effort to work with healthcare providers on both sides of the border to set up hotel accommodations. That's being explored right now. And there are all sorts of family aspects to that too. We can't force someone to do it, and different people have different situations with their family and childcare. So, but it's being considered, it's being looked at, the pieces are being put together to offer that. And of course, we'll continue to monitor what needs to be monitored as the situation grows. And keep in mind on the Detroit side, Mike Duggan was also the CEO of the Detroit Medical Center for many years. So he understands the healthcare system there. He understands the integration. And I think, even in 2001, after 9/11, or shortly after 9/11, I worked for the Canadian consulate in Detroit at that time. The border closed down for a short period of time, but when we had those long delays at the border, 3, 4, 5-hour delays in the months right after 9/11, you had hospitals over on the other side looking at how they could charter helicopters and ferries to get staff back and forth because the hospitals were in jeopardy of closing down. And so it's just, as we talk about the auto industry, the average part before it rolls off the line at the end of the assembly line crosses the border 6 to 8 times. And it's just a function of the integration we have in the supply chains. And that counts and includes the human supply chains as well that work on both sides of the border. So we've got to find a way to make it work while minimizing the risk for everyone involved.
Thank you, Mayor. And the Chamber on this side and on Detroit side is working very closely as well. We have calls pretty much every day. And it's in our interest to ensure that, while we take care of people, we ensure that people are safe, their health is safe, but at the same time, we're keeping the border open for trade. Very, very vital for us in the city, but also provincially and federally. So anything that you can do to further that and take that message to the province and to the feds. I know at this time there is an increased concern in terms of what's happening on the other side of the border. This morning there was a news that U.S. is looking at putting some military forces closer to the border, and that has raised some concern. But from business community perspective, I think it's important that we ensure that the traffic, the goods, and the commercial items movement is not restricted or is not disrupted. So any support that you can give on that account would be good.
Yeah, I think that is something that everyone understands from the highest levels in the land down to your municipal government and business leaders here on the line. It's of vital importance because the supply chains are so tightly integrated. The folks in Leamington have to be able to get the stuff that they're producing to market down south, and there are lots of things made down south that have to come up to fill Walmart, Costco, and grocery stores here. So we need that to continue to happen. The exemption is there, and we'll continue to make sure we support that.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, talking about the City of Windsor and the various departments that you have, services that you're providing, you mentioned about some of the services that are being offered. What are some of the departments that are continuing to offer the services, and which are the ones that have either modified work hours or may not be open? There has been some concern from business owners on permits, whether their permits are going to be offered. What about the permits that were in the pipeline? What about construction permits, because construction is still on? So what about those kind of permits? And then there was a question about what about marriage certificates? You know, people at this time, some of them have put off their wedding plans, and some are still going forward. So what are some of those services that are still being offered?
So I don't have the whole laundry list in front of me, Rakesh, and you know, we have about 2,500 employees, a lot of different moving parts in the organization. But with respect to some of the important things that you mentioned in terms of building permits, planning work, making sure that we can continue to fill the pipeline and move applications that were already in the pipeline out to the other end, recognizing that we're now at the end of March and the construction season really is going to start ramping up here very, very soon. Our folks are still working at home. All of the building plan reviewers, all of those folks are working from home. They have the tools. Their supervisors are working from home, so the workflow is still continuing. It may be a little bit slower. I hate to say that, but the reality is it may be a little bit slower because the process right now is a little more clumsy than it usually is. But some of the things that when it comes to permits, the necessary permits to operate, we'll still continue to issue those. But when it comes to things like marriage licenses, we're not doing that. We've taken a pause on that. That's not essential right now. And maybe other towns or municipalities are still doing that. But with respect to our operation, we closed the building to the public. So it's very difficult for us to deal with those types of things. Don't forget, we have a lot of services that we offer that were already available online. And so people can go online, still submit building plans and things like that online and have interaction that way and still fill the pipeline. So a lot of it was already there. Some of the things we've had to scale back that I think a reasonable person would say were less important type issues, type things for the city to deliver at this particular time. And we're kind of, you know, it seems that we're sort of chunking this out in about 2-week increments. You know, so it was people will be back from March break. Let's give a 2-week, a 14-day pause and, you know, look at school continuing April the 6th. Now that's been punted down the road. We still have many things that have timed out that way, but even the transit order that I issued today and the order that I issued to Devonshire and Tecumseh Mall to close, those were really 2-week windows. And not that we can't extend the order, but just trying to put a reasonable horizon on this so that you know, it doesn't seem to the public or certainly the owners of the business that this is going to stay this way in perpetuity, because it won't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, thank you for that. Mayor, you must have, you know, yesterday the province came up with their fiscal update, and in that they had a provision where they're going to come and support regions that have seen employment growth or reduced employment growth. And they proposed a new regional opportunities investment tax credit. So I'm wondering if this is something, because, you know, in the last few months, our unemployment rate has really gone up, close to about 8.3. So we've definitely seen a decline in employment opportunities here. Do you think this particular program that the province has is something that would apply to us? And is this something that you're doing, you're having any conversations?
So without seeming like I'm waffling on this, I don't know because I don't have the details yet. It's a great first sign. And whenever you get sort of these fiscal updates or budgets that are delivered, you know, the devil's always in the details after the fact, and we don't have the details yet. It's frankly not even 24 hours old yet. So it was just at 4 o'clock yesterday after the markets closed that the Minister of Finance delivered the fiscal update. We don't have the details. I know the staff there are burning the midnight candle and working very, very hard at the provincial level as well to try and put the pieces together. But I know the goal in talking with the Minister of Finance, texting with the Premier and others, their goal is to get this stuff out as quickly as possible. And, you know, I think the sort of the mantra that's been out there is speed trumps perfection. And so will a few people get on the system and get a few EI checks, maybe a few thousand get EI checks that really didn't deserve it. But as long as they can get the EI checks out to those who require it in a timely way, they can deal with the bad actors after the fact. And that seems to be the spirit of the provincial government as well, is let's get the programs, let's get the money out as quickly as we can, and speed will trump perfection. We'll deal with any bad actors or unintended consequences after the fact. So we're waiting for the details. It sounds positive on the face of it, and I hope that it's just another tool that we can use to help support business in the region. Thank you.
And Mayor, want to commend you for championing the need for us to have reduced hydro costs, with you advocating very strongly on it, the business community as well. The province has agreed to have off-peak pricing, which is really great. So thank you for that. And at this time, you know, there are businesses that want to remain open. There are also companies that are providing essential services that want to, you know, to continue with their operations. So this would really help a big way in terms of reducing their operating costs. You also had a great impact on Takeout Tuesday, that initiative. So, you know, that's great. You know, it was very heartwarming to see, you know, the community coming together and supporting the restaurants in our region. And for you to, you know, to push that out and support that, that was really well done. Congratulations on that. And so looking forward to the next Tuesday and see how the volume picks up next Tuesday. There are a lot of good initiatives that are happening locally, Mayor, and many of them you're supporting, whether it is supporting the food bank or whether it is, you know, getting companies who are offering free services or discounted services, you know, to highlight them and to support them. So there's a lot happening. Is there any example or examples that you would like to, you know, to mention where you've seen, you know, a company or individual come forward, you know, step up and are offering products or services that is benefiting many?
Dozens of them. And if I just start right at the top, I think everyone knows my great affinity for Hiram Walker, the story of the distillery, and how that really, the creation of Walkerville, how that led to the history of the city of Windsor, and ultimately became part of the city of Windsor in 1935. But I always say if it wasn't for Hiram Walker and the distillery and Canadian Club and all the work that he did, you may not have had an auto industry in the city of Windsor. And because Walkerville had all of the services, police, fire, roads, sewers, streetlights, everything was there in the town of Walkerville. The city of Windsor didn't even have all those things back at that time. But because of Hiram Walker and the profits from Canadian Club, he had all that, he paid for all that. So when Gordon McGregor brought Henry Ford over, they located the first factory directly adjacent to the distillery because they were able to pull the services very, very inexpensively and very quickly. And so that's just the precursor to say that, you know, 160 plus years later, the largest distillery in North America in continuous operation, they called us last week and said, Drew, we're thinking about manufacturing some hand sanitizer for the community, and we just want to donate it. And we're just wondering if you have any idea what type of volume you could use. And I said, well, what type of volume could you produce at any given time? And they said, probably a 5,000 liter batch. I said, let me call you back. And I about 10 or 15 minutes later, I had called a few people, I called them back, and the question back to them was, how much could you actually produce? Because 5,000 liters won't be enough. And so they have the first batch completed. It has to sit for 72 hours. We've arranged trucking thanks to a small business here locally, Laser Transport. They're picking this stuff, this hand sanitizer up. We'll be delivering it for us to many places in Windsor and Sarnia as far as Chatham. And it's been great cooperation. Unifor has been local 444, very good working with the workers in the factory and in the plant there to bottle and to get this stuff out. And in fact, Unifor and the folks there are actually going to be out delivering some of this product to our local long-term care homes. So a great community spirit, all pun intended, great community spirit all around, you know, because of this particular business. But there are a whole bunch of others who are stepping up to help their neighbors, their business associates next door, little things that people are doing, which, you know, never surprises you at this particular time because people are so caring. But a lot of great stories for sure, and things like Takeout Tuesday. I get that this wasn't for everybody. When you get, perhaps two people in your family who both get layoff notices, the last thing you're thinking about is ordering a $40 pizza, in the city. I get that some people really had to scale back and are conserving cash, but the idea was if you had the money to do it, if you could afford it, either take out, ask for delivery if you didn't want to leave the house or you're on sort of self-isolation, or heck, buy a gift card and give it to somebody else. And by all accounts, it was very, very successful. I had reports from many folks who were thankful on social media that they found some success with that. So we'll keep it up. And if Tuesday doesn't work for anyone, just find a day that ends in Y and make it work for yourself.
Yes, takeouts is available any day of the week, right? So you have to wait for Tuesdays. But you did mention about several companies that have stepped up. There are other companies, there's so many other businesses here that are available. Their employees, their products, their services are available. What message do you have for those, specifically about what are the needs of the community, what are the needs of the city, and how can companies contribute at this time? What advice do you have, or what is it that you need from the private sector, from the business community?
Well, I think we just put out a call this week, Rakesh. We're Thursday today, so it was just about 2 days ago, we put out a call to the entire community, whether you're a business owner or just have some supplies in your basement, generally for personal protective equipment. And it may sound funny, why would a person have supplies in their basement? Like, why would you and I have that? Well, I have people who teach CPR part-time and just said, you know what, I've got 6 boxes of gloves, nitrile gloves, I'm happy to donate them to the cause. And so you had folks doing that. And then you had businesses here who, the casino stepped forward and loaned some equipment to the hospital. All sorts of folks have been stepping forward to try and provide personal protective equipment and sanitizer, because the hospital, our hospital, every hospital probably in North America is in the same boat right now, where they're running low on PPE because of the influx of people coming to the hospitals and the requirements to change out so often. And so, the stuff's here. A lot of plants and places are closed. So the material's just sitting on the shelf, and I'm really quite overwhelmed by the support from the community to help make sure that our primary health provider here can continue to function in a safe way. And that's just one example. When it comes to, what other small businesses can do, I get a lot of folks are just sort of in hunker down mode here. That seems to be where everyone is in their headspace. Just hunker down, let's get through, whether it's 3 weeks or 3 months, how am I going to make it through? And so start thinking about what it looks like when you get to the other side. I know it's tough to do when you're in the middle of it, but start thinking about that part of the conversation. And then to the extent that you work with other vendors and suppliers, make sure that you are supporting them. So I've had, for instance, Rakesh, I've had folks say, well, great, the province passed legislation that says I can't be evicted. I don't have to pay my rent. And so it's like, well, okay, you may not have to pay your rent, but what amount could you pay in order to keep the landlord functioning? Like, the whole system has to work and has to work together. So it's my hope that people will be fair and reasonable to one another at this particular time, whether it's buying toilet paper at Costco or paying a portion of your rent if you can afford to pay anything. And just remember that it's everyone that's affected. None of us will be unaffected by this. Every single person, every single business, every level of government will be affected by what's going on here today. So let's just treat each other fair and reasonably and try and find a way forward together.
Absolutely. And Mayor, businesses I mentioned, they're willing to provide whatever support and services that is needed, and several of them have stepped up. There is manufacturing companies, as you know, they're quickly changing what they're doing and making molds now to make masks and so on. There's so many small businesses that are coming forward and offering services either at a highly discounted price or offering it free, complimentary. So the chamber is putting together a page where we'll be able to highlight these companies who are offering the services at discount or complimentary, so that we have a collection of companies and the community can benefit from it. So stay tuned, we'll be having that page live soon, and people, individuals, companies that have the services and products that can offer that at this time they can offer to the community so others can benefit. please connect with us, and we'll have your information on the Chamber's webpage, on the website.
And so Rakesh, let me jump in here and say, we had an email today from a developer in the city, and he was saying, what's the city doing, 90 days from now? And, we're really in the heart of this, trying to deal with the immediate needs, and we're sort of right in the middle of just trying to keep things going and make sure that the public is safe. So frankly, we haven't turned our mind too far down the road just yet. We're getting there, but we're still working through the urgent issues in front of us. But I know the Windsor-Essex Economic Development Corporation, Steve McKenzie and his team, along with the Chamber, along with your Chamber, the Chamber in Leamington, Workforce Windsor-Essex, WeTech Alliance, you name it. I mean, I saw the laundry list of local organizations, all of which were completely appropriate to be plugged into this regional organization, this regional task force that says, what do you need? It basically is a message to business. What do you need? What's it going to look like 90 days from now? How can we help you? What messages can we send? How do we work together? Completely appropriate. I thank the Chamber and WERCC for doing that, for leading that effort. And it's great because I'm plugged into that board. The past warden, Tom Bain, sits on the board. And so you have direct connections with the city and the county and great connections. It's a perfect role for everyone to play, perfect connections with the business community, and try and harness the energy that exists out there. So I've received lots of emails and ideas from folks who, quite frankly, I just don't have the time or the staff capacity right now at the city to work through all of the things. So when people call and say I could print ventilators with a 3D printer, it sounds great on the face of it, but it needs Health Canada approval. There's a whole process for this, none of which is really tied into the city proper. So it's great that you guys can act as a clearinghouse to really help put the people on the right path, the businesses on the right path at this sort of, this is unprecedented. What we're going through is unprecedented. And so they need the guidance, they need the advice. People want to help, which is great. And you guys are there to help, and I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, the Chamber is very happy to be part of the task force led by the Economic Development Corporation. As you mentioned, there are several organizations. And yesterday in the meeting that we had, there were some really good examples of local innovative solutions that are being brought up. Companies coming up with products and innovations that are going to be very helpful going forward. So, we live in a great region. We have some very innovative companies, and it's great that this task force is coordinating activities with several organizations and private sector companies. Talking of the private sector companies, Mayor, through your office, we'd like to send this message to your counterparts and to the province and to the feds. Two issues that the business community is dealing with that we need help in is one, access to cash flow. You must have heard about this 100 times. It is still a major issue. Especially for those that want to keep their operation going, access to cash flow is challenging still. Though the government is working with the chartered banks and the credit unions and BDC and EDC, it still is a challenge to access. And also the cost of borrowing is something that needs to be looked into. So that's one issue. And the second is to do with wage subsidy, where the government has said that if you are going to continue to have your workforce and if you want to continue to provide your services and products and keep the lights on, you can provide a subsidy of 10% to your employees, which frankly at this time is very inadequate. There are great examples of countries like Netherlands and Sweden and Denmark that are offering 70–75%. So we've brought it up to to the province, to the Fed, but we also need your voice behind that. We need all efforts and everyone to get this across to the Feds that at this time we do need to look into the wage subsidy and increase it substantially.
So what would that, I appreciate what you're saying. What do the members think would be, if it's not 10%, what is the appropriate level?
There has been a conversation on that. The minimum that the members have come up with is a 50% to begin with. But there are others who are saying that we should do what the others are doing, which is to take it up to 70–75%. Now I understand that this will be a huge cost over the 107 billion that the government has already put out towards addressing the issues. But in order to keep the operations going and to sustain the companies at this time, at least a 50% wage subsidy is essential. It will also prevent people from going on EI, and it will also prevent people from tapping the CERT, which was announced yesterday, because there are those that want to work, there are companies that want to remain open and provide the products and services, which we badly need. So we need to really incentivize them and give them the support. So at least a 50% wage subsidy is something that would be needed to keep things going.
Okay, thank you.
So Mayor, finally, any piece of advice for the community? I know, social distancing, you've been constantly talking about that. Anything that you would like to leave with our community, any message that, business community or otherwise need to hear?
I think, Rakesh, thank you for that. I think, all of the things that you've heard so far with respect to federal support, provincial support, or municipal support, certainly at the two higher levels of government, I think that is just the start of the conversation. It may be, I read a very interesting article in The Economist just the other day saying that the only real path out of this is legislation that says no to foreclosures, puts a moratorium on foreclosures and requires banks and credit unions and debt holders to work to refinance and to come to terms that make sense. Otherwise, you could have a very large collapse in big parts of the economy. And so I think what you're seeing at the federal level and provincial level are just the starts of the conversation. I think we still have some more capacity at the city level, depending how far this goes. But certainly our tools are, our tools are much more limited because of size and scale than the other levels of government. But we're prepared to move if we have to provide even more relief when it comes to property taxes, and something that we'll be exploring as we move forward for sure.
Thank you. And Mayor, I know there is a document or a website where people can go and ask questions directly to you, I believe, right?
If they just go to my social media accounts, any of them, we're monitoring that. And I do these little videos, 4 or 5 a day, or 3 or 4 a day anyway, and try and respond to people's questions. There's a lot of common questions, and then some are more specific. And if I can get an answer on a more specific question, I do that as well. So happy to stay in touch. This is all about communication, make sure we all understand what everyone needs, where everyone's going, the support that's provided, and make sure that everyone has as much information as possible to make the best decisions, both for the protection of their health and well-being, but also, looking at business moving forward, making sure that everyone can get back on their feet, business can get back on their feet, sustain themselves in the short term, get back on their feet as quickly as possible thereafter.
Thank you, Mayor. You've been doing a terrific job, true champion of the region. You've been working tirelessly, and thank you for everything you're doing and your leadership at this time. Appreciate much. The city is in great hands with you and your team, and the chamber's members are there to provide support. And we're here. If there's anything that the business community can do, please let us know. We'll be happy to provide our services, take ideas and inputs from you and also from the others in the business community so that we can represent it at the provincial and the federal level. On a daily basis, the chamber is in touch with our counterparts, be it the network in the province or be it the network of chambers throughout Canada. We are in conversations and conference calls with Minister Mary Ing's office. We are in touch with provincial small business ministers, Minister Vic Fedeli, Minister Phillips' office. So we are constantly working, just like you, Mayor, to get the information across from these sources to our members, to the business community, but also take the inputs that we're receiving on a website, on a dedicated email, which is info@windsor-essex-chamber.org, where people can provide us their inputs, their concerns, their suggestions. We're taking that and we're also relaying it to the appropriate authorities. So again, I want to thank you for making time for this. I want to also remind everyone that's on this call today that this recording will be available. You can go visit, the Chamber's website where it will be available. And, keep those questions and those comments and the suggestions coming. We are going to take all of that and make sure that, your voice is heard. We continue to work very closely with the other agencies, locally, provincially, and federally. So if there is any information that you think we can carry for you, please feel free to bring it to attention again at info@windsor-essex-chamber.org. With that, Mayor Dilkens, I'll take a quick look and see if there's any question. I think I've captured all of the questions that have been coming in, but also the ones that you received before this webinar. And as I mentioned earlier, this webinar is a series that we're doing. Tomorrow we'll be bringing in Warden Gary McNamara to this call at the same time. So, please join us who is on call today and inform others as well. And if you have any questions that you would like to ask to the warden, please send it over to us. Mayor, again, thank you so much. Stay well, stay healthy, and we'll be in touch soon. And thanks to everyone for joining in. We'll connect with you again tomorrow at 2:30.
Thank you.